I think the way we're thinking about the game stuff definitely gives us an advantage, mainly because we've all been on stage before. We've like used to the pressure that's gonna come on us, whereas like some of the other teams or the players might not have faced this kind of pressure before because they only played like matches that have not been on stage, or they've never had this very serious matches. So I think that'll definitely be an advantage for us.
Welcome back, everyone. We're heading into Game 2 of the semifinal series between Goldcorn United and Tempo Storm. As Santorin said right there, nobody looked nervous on their team whatsoever that game.
Yeah, they're not even on stage yet when this will be the biggest advantage for them when they have the live finals. But for now, I mean, they're crushing so far versus Tempo Storm, and a lot of it is off the back of Phoenix.
Yeah, Phoenix just ran away with that game. We said Goldcorn United kind of just played their entire game. It was more like Phoenix show, that entire series. Cassiopeia, he had a massive amount of damage in that game, didn't die whatsoever. And this was a matchup that they basically banned him into and then picked the victor, which was not a winning lane matchup whatsoever.
No, I mean, they were doing a good job early, giving a little bit of attention to hat tricks, just enough to be fine in lane. But then there was a big turnaround 2v1 by Phoenix that kind of blew the game open. And then after he got that, I mean, he knew how to pressure the map. He made a lot of roam plays. He was helping in the jungle and with vision control. And he and Santorin seem to have really good jungle mid synergy.
Yeah, and that's one of the strengths that Goldcorn United definitely highlighted when we have been able to talk to them in the past, 5 weeks of challenge or whatever. They're saying they're developing synergy not just between Santorin and the solo lanes, Santorin and Mad Life, of course, establishing control all over the map. And that was one of their strengths as well. Not only was Phoenix able to roam around and exert that pressure across the map, but it was because Santorin, mainly just him, was getting all that vision control down on the opposing team's top side of the map.
Yeah, and that definitely helped Solo as well, who started moving around the map. He came down early on to help grab that first outer turret. Phoenix obviously also going up to help Solo get kills as well. So the whole top side really worked well together because they had pressure in the top lane. Santorin had smart pathing, and then Phoenix was able to make the individual outplay.
Well, on the flip side, when it comes to talking about Team Tempo Storm that game, there wasn't a lot to say about them because there wasn't a lot that they actually did that game. Their bottom lane went even. Their 2 solo lanes wound up losing, even though there was a little bit of pressure exerted in the mid lane early on to try to get Victor to level 6 safer first, but they just were never able to get the ball rolling. Only 1 kill and 1 dragon the entire game.
Yeah, they were definitely on the back foot for basically the entire game after around the 6-7 minute mark, and they did try and do some stuff. So when they saw Santorin on the top side once, they tried to force a fight in the bot lane with the Ash Arrow. It's just very hard to win that against a Varus and Soraka, who can kind of have that disengage option where they can heal up, they shoot the Varus ult out, and then worst case scenario, they flash away. So it's very hard to force that without any kind of jungler assistance, and like we said, the jungler was mostly controlled by Santorin.
Yeah, and by the time we actually saw Tempo Storm being able to really kind of pull the plug on pull the trigger on the way their composition was going to wind up working, it was a little bit too little too late. We saw them try to jump on the mash. At that point, Soraka was able to heal him up basically to full HP the entire time, and the rest of Goldcorn United collapsed because, well, Tempo Storm had no vision whatsoever in their jungle.
Right, and the other problem, of course, is the fact that Phoenix is the big carry of that game. So it's nice that we saw them jump onto Mash and Mad Life a couple different times, but if you're not actually able to kill the big threat in Phoenix on Cassiopeia, then you're probably not going to win that fight.
And we'll have to see if there's any adaptations. We are in picks and bans for game number 2. Tempo Storm this time around is going to wind up being on the blue side, so they will have the option of that first pick overall in the draft, but they're going to continue bending away the Ryze away from Phoenix. The last time they did it on red side, we thought maybe it was, Ryze is a very strong pick, but it looks like they're going to continue the focus on Phoenix because, well, now Cassiopeia is off the table.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like it's the stop Phoenix from going off show. Goldcorn United going to ban out the LeBlanc on their own, as well as the Varus taking out basically what are considered 2 of the strongest champions on this patch. Gonna need to see what else they decide to go for. A little surprised to see the LeBlanc ban. We know Phoenix isn't afraid to play into that sometimes, but maybe the team overall elected to take just a power pick off the table, not need to risk Tempo Storm grabbing that and snowballing.
The Tempo Storm already showed in game number 1 that they're not afraid to try to get an advantage for hat tricks in the mid lane. If you give them a champion like the LeBlanc, that's an advantage that is very difficult to come back from if the LeBlanc starts getting ahead.
Tempo Storm also banning out the Rengar. Seemed like they thought that was a little bit of an issue that game. Obviously, Santorin got a huge CS lead. He didn't need to make the big Rengar plays that we're used to seeing, but I actually think that was smart of him. You have the Cassiopeia kind of getting out of control there. She was making a lot of the plays. You don't need to go force a bot play when Cassiopeia is roaming topside. Instead, he just elects to farm out in the mid lane. So I think overall the team played really smart, so it's nice to see that they're not forcing too hard just because they have a Rengar, and so Tempo Storm takes that one away. And then they also grab the first pick, Graves.
Yeah, so Graves going to be the pick for Zensoul in the jungle again. They highlighted the Vi game 1, but they decided not to go with that one. So that is going to be one of the more powerful jungle picks, although Sentinel did fall behind extremely early on it. We'll have to see if that was a symptom of the Rengar in the opposing team's jungle, now with the Kha'Zix being locked in for Santorin.
Yep, so Kha'Zix not quite as efficient of a clear as Rengar is, and that's definitely the playstyle that we tend to see Santorin favoring, going for those CS leads and pressure advantages versus just the big plays. And a lot of that was also due to the fact that they had the Renekton, extremely strong pick that was able to help make sure that he was free to go for those kind of Krug invades. But once again, Rumble is locked in for solo, banned away game 1, extremely strong top laner, so Gold Coin United still coming out with some picks that they clearly like.
Yeah, and something that they're not afraid to pretty much blind pick in this circumstance. Once again, kind of throwing no heed to what Quas is going to be able to pick against it. Rumble already very strong into a lot of the tank matchups, so even though they've left the Scion open this time, not going to be afraid to run the Rumble into it.
Yeah, for sure. That's definitely something that I think a lot of Rumbles would be comfortable with. Tempo Storm also grabbing the Ezreal Karma, a pretty strong lane right now that's been raising in priority for a lot of bot lanes. We've seen in the LCK basically being taken over everything but Varus, and just the scaling that comes in for the Ezreal is generally just a higher DPS threat than pretty much anything else in the game. Gold Coin United going with the Caitlyn to try and counter it, probably trying to hold it down a little bit in the early lane. Karma is a strong support laner, so it's no surprise to see that they don't want to take a potentially weak counter pick there.
No, at the same exact time, though, as the first ban of the second ban phase, looks like they are a little bit more afraid of the Scion than we anticipated. They are going to be banning that one away, but of course that leaves Quas's champion pool. As much as we say he loves picking these unique pickups, it's still a little bit slim, because you mentioned already, doesn't play the Maokai, that's also seen significant enough nerfs to kind of take it down a couple of pegs in the tier list. Doesn't necessarily play that Nautilus. We've seen Hatrix take that one up when it winds up being locked in for the side of Tempo Storm. I don't think I've seen Quas play a Poppy game, thank goodness, but you know, pinching this champion pool and using it against them is something we haven't seen teams doing against Tempo Storm at all.
Right, and I think the Scion, though, I'm sure Soul is comfortable in the matchup in the 1v1. Scion does have a lot of that kind of global threat. He can ult down to the bot lane, try and turn something TP top. We saw Quas go for that play multiple times throughout the Challenger Series, so you don't want to have to deal with that kind of pressure, and just making sure that he's stuck onto maybe a more normal tank or even a carry versus carry matchup might be something that Gold Coin is comfortable with. Though we know Quas, like we said, a lot of weird picks. He might have something prepared for the Rumble, but we'll have to see. There's also the Nautilus ban, generally considered the best tank on this patch as well.
Yeah, we've seen Quas kind of go back and forth between some interesting top lane picks. We've seen him play the Camille, which has seen significant nerfs and has kind of been left open for at least both of these games so far, more frequently than she used to be banned out, as well as the Vladimir pick was something he was experimenting with. He played it in the tiebreaker matchup. Didn't really wind up working out for him, though.
No, that was a time where he was pinched as well in this champ pool. It seems like Gold Coin United has identified that as a potential weakness. Get him off Scion as the one tank he wants to play, and then take a lot of these kind of bully top laners. The Renekton in game 1, the Rumble in game 2, Tempo Storm banning out the Jace. That becomes a much bigger threat of a mid lane pick once you have the Rumble top lane securing a lot of AP damage, but it looks like Gold Coin United going to go with another kind of bully in Syndra.
Well, the Syndra was something they banned away from Hatrix in game number 1. This time around, it's going to be Gold Coin United themselves taking it up for them. And as you mentioned, the Jace ban coming through. You already have a Caitlyn, you already have a Rumble. You have the makings of a very dangerous composition. Once you start taking down one tower, the dominoes sort of fall one after another that way. Then you also have the potential for having the Jace kind of split push while the Rumble can group up and utilize that teleport to wind up getting some really good equalizers. But this time around, it's going to be Quas himself that takes that Renekton into that matchup.
Yeah, and we see the Vladimir mid coming in for Hatrix. So I love the Renekton pick into Rumble. It has a good matchup there. It's going to give Quas pressure. We know that he's an important member for Tempo Storm to be able to get going on his own. He doesn't tend to receive a lot of help, so if he's able to get pressure on his own, that's great. Vladimir, a very weak pick on its own, especially in the laning phase, though it does survive all-ins and attention pretty well, and that's one of the big threats when you're playing against a Syndra. So for the matchup, not that bad. As we see, Gold Coin United also round out their comp with the Soraka again.
Well, so Mad Life going to get the second time around on the Soraka. First time worked out well. First time we've seen him play it. This time around, we'll see if it is as effective. But as you mentioned, with that Vladimir pickup, it also gives them a little bit more insurance scaling into the later stages of the game. Quas or Renekton in general necessarily doesn't scale as well as some of the other top lane, mega tanks or even some of the later game carries wind up doing. Vladimir himself has a rather weak early lane phase compared to some of the other, specifically mid lane champions, but will eventually ramp up to the point where even though he might not deal the most burst damage, he's so hard to kill and just deals so much damage eventually.
He's a huge threat, assuming the game goes late. And the kind of thing that I'm a little scared for Gold Coin United this time around is that they don't really have a tank of any kind. Obviously, Rengar can work a little bit as a frontliner. They had the Renekton last game. This time around, you're basically looking at a Zanya's Rumble and then the Kha'Zix. So if they struggle to get a lead early game, we're going to have to see if they're able to play these kinds of low CC, low tank comps that have been bugging a lot of teams around the world, other than maybe the top Korean teams.
Well, this was a composition similar to something Goldcoin United ran in. I believe it was week 2 or week 3, where they had the LeBlanc mid lane, they had a Jace in the top lane, and that was the composition. They put the Braum in the bottom lane, and basically was like, this is our dedicated tank, this is our poke and our dive kind of composition. This is what we want to do, and they struggled to close out that game. They did wind up winning it. However, it was a symptom of Game 1 Goldcoin United.
Yeah, maybe it was just Game 1 Goldcoin United where they do tend to struggle. But what's scary is they kind of crushed last game, and now that we're in Game 2, they might turn it up even more. I do like Tempo Storm's draft a little bit more than last game. Obviously, I'm not a big fan of Vladimir mid. I feel like it's basically conceding a lot of advantages around the map to say, I hope I don't get snowballed on. But that was the big problem last game, so maybe it makes a little bit of sense here.
Well, one of the things that Tempo Storm does not have in their draft phase this game as well is a lot of hard CC and a really dedicated go button. We talked about their compositions at the top of the show. This is something that they usually rely on. They had Ashe last game with 1 go button. It wasn't enough for them to be able to make any plays around the map. Now where the only go button really is Quas's stun maybe, or maybe like a Karma tether. We'll have to see if they're actually able to convert any of those lane advantages into something in the mid stages of the game, because they were down basically, as we mentioned, from the level 6 mark forward last game.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to play without any kind of tank or CC. From ahead or behind. From ahead, you want some kind of tank to threaten dives or neutral objectives by being able to survive the damage of them. And then also when you're behind, it's hard to find a pick-off if you don't have anyone to land any CC. Goldcoin United having a little bit more of that. They do have the Syndra, potentially, but that's about it. Both these team comps, pretty squishy, pretty low CC, though Vladimir does get a little annoying to try and kill, like you said.
Yeah, he definitely gets to be annoying to kill. So that could mean one of two things. Either we're going to have a really messy game with a lot of fights, or knowing these two teams, it's going to be a very calm game where we're trying to get advantages throughout the laning phase, basically off the back of either Sentinel or Santorin. And as the way game number 1 went, that's what I'm really looking here. Is Sentinel going to be as starved in his jungle on this Graves as he was last game versus the Rengar?
A little surprising there. I saw a Tempo Storm pinging out the entire jungle path that Sentinel wanted to go for. Not many teams do that, so it's kind of cool to see that. This time we see Graves starting on the blue buff basically alone. Santorin on Kha'Zix, the typical start. On the Raptors, get the early 2 and then go up onto your red buff. One of the things that this path does lead into is an early 3 off the Krugs and then going for a kind of cheesy gank on the top side. We'll need to see if Santorin wants to do that. It is a carry versus carry matchup, which can make it extremely important to get a lead early. Talking about getting leads early, Phoenix is going hard on hat tricks.
Already with the early aggressive level 2, and we see the exhaust being taken by Phoenix in this mid lane matchup as well against the Vladimir. So we'll see if Phoenix can be as dominant over hat tricks as he was in game number 1, or with the Vladimir a little bit more, as you mentioned, kind of a slow start laner, but more sustained capabilities. And the fact that there's no ignite picked up by Phoenix will of course mean that he's a little bit safer in the lane phase this time.
Yep, Santorin not going for that early gank onto the top side, instead going back. Gonna head down to his bot side jungle now. Gets the early purchase. And it's gonna try and clear around there. Sentinel doing that full clear that Graves likes to do. He's able to clear relatively full health. And, you know, like we said, Graves is a champion that doesn't have a ton of playmaking early on, but does scale extremely well. So making sure that you keep your farm up is extremely important, something he struggled to do last game.
And it will be something that Tempo Storm, if they reach the later stages of this game, will definitely need, is a large source of burst damage. Because you have the Vladimir, you have the Ezreal, very pokey, very sustaining damage champions. If the Renekton doesn't wind up scaling super, super far ahead, like, say, getting a Rift Herald, like Solo did in game number 1, he as well will struggle to provide an apt amount of damage. But as you mentioned, Goldcoin United with a very tankless composition, they still have a Soraka on their side, so it'll be really, really annoying. But the later stages of this game, once you kind of break into that mid-game area, it could be for some messy.
Yeah, very messy when no one can get locked down, and there's a lot of survivability for both teams. The Vladimir in particular being one of the ones that tends to bait people. Soraka as well. Very annoying to get a fight that you think is going in your favor, and then the ambulance comes in, heals them up, gets the global ult as well, turns fights all over the map. Can be a very annoying pick to deal with.
I'm also kind of looking at this bottom side of the map. As you mentioned, the Ezreal and Karma kind of being a more favored lane on 7.4. We've already seen, like you mentioned, a lot of the games in the LCK really like going for this Ezreal Karma kind of pokey and prodding style in the bottom lane. But Caitlyn in and of herself has always been a very lane dominant marksman.
Yep, she is able to kind of get the push on this lane that might be hard otherwise. They also have good trading with Mad Life being able to heal up any kind of that poke damage that this Tempo Storm lane is going to want to throw down. So that's a good counter there, and both of them actually scale extremely well, which is one of the things that when you go up against the Ezreal, his scaling is a little bit better than a lot of the utility AD carries. And with the Caitlyn, you're able to match that, though your early or your mid game is a little bit weaker compared to a Miramana Triforce Ezreal that you tend to see.
Yep, and because of the potential to build into something like that Triforce, the Ezreal is able to start with that longsword and 3 health potions, whereas the Caitlyn, a little bit more of the quote-unquote traditional start with a Doran's laid-in health potion of her own, but it looks like Sentinel will be the first one to make its presence known in this game, and Solo not even going to want to blow in any summoners, just realizes he was up too far and goes down for first blood.
Right, really surprising that they were able to get that gank. You see that there was a lot of wards for Gold Coin Knight. It looks like those came in after, and now the pressure keeps up. Tempo Storm trying to force all in onto the bot lane.
Flash forward with the root as well, and Sheep's going to wind up trading exhaust right there as he wants to drop down low, has to run away from that himself. Freeze very low on mana, was not able to provide enough damage in that fight.
Yeah, a close all in there. Looked like Mash might have been able to flash in, maybe for a last on Sheep. Elects not to go for it, holds onto that summoner. Solo teleports back into the top side, and a good gank overall for Tempo Storm. They don't always go top side that often, but able to convert on that one.
Yeah, I guess when they have Cross on something like the Renekton, it is going to be extremely lane dominant and very dependent on how the lane phase goes. They're not afraid to throw a couple of resources up his way. But the first blood gold did wind up going down onto Sentinel on that top side. On the bottom side, at the end of the day, it does wind up going a little bit more in favor of Mash and Mad Life because you have the sustain from that Soraka, but it's a 3 summoner trade for 3 summoner trade.
Yep, so a good early game here for Tempo Storm compared to last game. You're probably happy with that kill going onto the Graves, honestly. It's going to scale a little bit harder than the Renekton. It would have been nice to get that kill for the top lane, help snowball individually a little bit harder.
Well, now we'll have to see what the response from Santorin is. He was very good at pillaging Sentinel's jungle last game, and with this Kha'Zix pickup, we'll see if he's able to do the exact same thing or not. He does have Phoenix kind of coming down to help him out. They have a couple of control wars already placed on this bottom side of the map, and it looks like with Sheep and Freeze, after that trade, they know those summoners are down. They're rotating down here for quite the dive, but Sentinel's already shown up as well. Freeze going to be able to arcane shift away from the Phoenix stun right there, so it is going to wind up being GCU. Didn't even realize how low they poked this tower down, but already forcing away the bottom side of the map from Tempo Storm.
Yeah, you see that perma-shove that can come in from that Caitlyn. You have the healing from Mad Life as well, and a good roam by Gold Coin United forces them away. Not actually able to convert it into a kill, but good pressure overall. Forces the Ezreal back now at a 10 CS disadvantage. Sentinel had to go down to help cover as well. So the gold lead still in Tempo Storm's favor, but just barely.
Well, and because of that pressure on the bottom side, and because of that CS advantage, we see Freeze going for the I'll get there eventually build, going for the Cull in addition to the Tear of the Goddess, whereas Mashmi on the opposite side has gone back and picked up a BF sword for himself. So if there's already lane dominance established by Gold Coin United on the bottom side of the map, this purchase is going to make it even more difficult for Tempo Storm to survive and keep that very low HP tower alive.
It's actually a really interesting matchup in terms of how the item power spikes come in. You see early game, it does favor Caitlyn just due to her kit and the strength of Caitlyn's laning, especially if you get it back like this where you're able to get your BF sword and he has to go with the Cull tier. Ideally, you want to trade a little bit heavier with the Ezreal, force the backs earlier if you can. Hard to do that against the Soraka, so a good purchase for Mash there. And he's going to have control of this lane for the rest of the way, but then, like we said, that mid game comes in when Caitlyn's on an item and a half, something like Hurricane BF Sword. It's not nearly as strong as the Ezreal, who might be cashing in on his Triforce Cull, Cell, and kind of hitting that annoying, pokey Ezreal mid-game.
That Ezreal power spike and the Caitlyn plateau, so to speak, hit very well where Tempo Storm really likes to kind of kick into high gear their game plans, which is around that 20-minute mark. When they have gold advantages, they wind up winning the games at that point. When they don't, it unfortunately takes a little while for them to bleed out and they slowly die like they did in game number 1. So bottom side of the map, though it may be slightly in favor of Gold Coin United, the top side of the map was in favor of Tempo Storm, although Solo in this Renekton versus Rumble matchup, still very content to push up quite aggressively with that Flame Spitter. Does still have basically even CS, if 1 or 2 more over his lane opponent in this matchup, despite being first blood.
Yeah, overall, Tempo Storm not doing too bad. You would have wanted to see that maybe the Renekton get a little bit more of an advantage with that kill, but the big thing for me is the fact that Hatrix is actually farming mostly even in this mid lane matchup. That's very useful for Tempo Storm, that they are getting some chip damage down on a lot of their turrets. They will probably lose the first one in the game, but that's something that is not surprising to see happen when you pick such like a low playmaking team in the early game. They really don't have too much to do with Vladimir, Karma, Ezreal, and Graves. So we see the all-in from Phoenix here, trunking out Hatrix pretty heavily.
Man, Hatrix did not have his pull available. Used that one underneath the tower to just wind up farming up some minions. So Phoenix knew that it was A-okay to do that. Looks like it was more of a warning ultimate as Phoenix goes extremely low on mana himself and will wind up going actually over to his own blue buff, where Santorin is like, hey, I heard you're low on mana, I'm gonna get you this one.
Let me help you out, bro.
And even though Phoenix has not necessarily been able to kill Hatrix, and Hatrix has been able to keep up in farm, it did cause a little bit of a worry, the fact that we do have Phoenix pushing up so aggressively. He was open to roam down into that bottom side early on with Santorin and try to put some pressure onto this bottom side of the map, where now Mad Life, the heal actually gonna have to be burned out there by Mash as well, the flash used as well. So Tempo Storm, despite not necessarily having all the item advantages, did have a Graves in that trade, so wound up forcing them back.
Yeah, overall, the side of Gold Coin United doing a decent job absorbing some pressure here. It was, I think they knew they're pretty obvious the Graves was coming down there, so they're not afraid to blow their summoners defensively, not risk getting chunked out and having the flash follow. A nice advantage for Tempo Storm to be able to grab that. Might be able to alleviate some of the pressure down the bot lane, though Gold Coin United, they made one roam down there. They could easily make another one.
And Gold Coin United has also done a good job kind of stemming the tide of the gold advantage that was gained from that first blood from Tempo Storm. Gold counts pretty much even across the board. A lot of this is going to be made up by those CS advantages in the middle and the bottom side of the map here by Gold Coin United. But we'll see if they're actually able to transition any sort of pressure from these lane matchups into that early first tower bot side, into something. They already have that bottom side of the map littered with wards. There's a Cloud Drake available, which they could potentially wind up taking, although it is not the most important Drake in the map right now. That tower is probably where they're going to set their sights for first, if they so choose to roam.
Right, I'm sure at some point here, Gold Coin United is going to make a play down for that bot turret. We see Tempo Storm making another repeat gang on the Mad Life. No flash available, goes to the flash tether here.
Yes, they wind up rooting down on the Mad Life. Mash actually going to take a lot of damage while the Wish gets popped, and Mad Life's going to be dropping low and dropping dead. Sheep himself.
Teleport's coming in.
Yeah, the teleport is there. The Equalizer comes out, but in comes Quas as well. Zentil's going to try to flash away. He will survive. Uses the collateral damage to run away, but Santorin cleans up the very low HP Karma. Solo is going to be marked for death with the Vladimir Hemo Plague, so he will go in and get as much damage as possible, but it's Quas that flashes in, picks up a kill. The Vladimir is going to be going forward as well. Quas will fall, but there's another kill picked up in that fight as well for Tempo Storm, and it looks like all in all, it's a 3-for-2 in favor of Tempo Storm.
The game kind of blows open around the bot lane, no surprise there, and you see how powerful that Renekton is in these early skirmishes, able to frontline extremely well for Tempo Storm, buying them the space they need to win that fight. It was a good teleport by Solo getting in there, but was not actually able to finish off Sheep fast enough with his Rumble ultimate. And it is pretty hard to land that, like we said, with no lockdown CC, but we're going to take another look at this play.
And this is the play that was set up by Tempo Storm. Sentinel putting more pressure on the bottom lane already in this game than he did in game number 1.
Yeah, a lot of less pressure around the map to have to respond to here. A good flash onto Mad Life. He has no summoners. Easy to grab a kill there. Sheep does get extremely low, which makes his teleport dangerous, but you see the Rumble Equalizer not really able to lock anyone down. The heal coming in, still available from Freeze, helping get Sheep out of there, and then a good follow by Quas and Hatrix. Like we said, this annoying backline divers that are Vladimir and Renekton. Eventually Renekton does go down, but stayed up for a very long time during that fight.
Sentinel barely able to survive, but using that collateral damage and the dash to get himself out of harm's way, away from that Rumble ultimate. So all in all, really good fight for Tempo Storm. Got themselves a slight gold advantage now. You know, about 13 minutes into the game, this is where Gold Coin United was really starting to run away with things after they had gotten that gank down in the mid lane. This time, Tempo Storm playing more to the strengths that we assumed they would play to in that bottom side of the map, have gotten themselves some gold advantages. They don't actually have a gold advantage in their bottom lane matchup, but they are transitioning leads out of the top lane and out of the jungle because of the pressure from that play.
Right, it's nice that they're up 4 kills to 2. Still no objectives taken in this game so far. And Gold Coin United still positioned to probably be the first one to grab it here, grabbing that bot turret.
So Gold Coin United, although they lose that fight, all of the poke and prod and lane pressure they got down in that bottom lane does result in that first tower gold going over to the bottom lane duo. So Mash going to continue to extend his slight advantages over his counterpart in Freeze. But most important, this is going to open that Caitlyn up now to move around the map. Caitlyn extremely good at taking outer towers. The inner towers, when she plateaus on items, a little bit harder to take.
Yeah, and a nice ult there from Solo, reading that the pressure was going to come up for the top side as his bot lane was grabbing the turret. Ults the wave so that they can't get the dive off, survives that. Gold Coin United keeps the pressure up around bot lane.
Yep, they saw Sentinel up in top side, so they don't need to move the Caitlyn out of lane quite yet. Might as well get a lot of damage down on that tier 2 bottom tower.
Yep, and now they're going to back off as they sense that there's no more pressure along the top side. And smart play by both teams. Obviously, one of the strengths of Rumble is the fact that he's probably the second hardest champion to force map-wide plays against. He's able to clear the waves extremely easily with his ultimate to avoid the dive. The other one, of course, the king of it, GP.
You are going to see the Cloud Drake, however, started up by Gold Coin United. So while Sentinel was away on the top side of the map, the Cloud Drake will be the play for Gold Coin United. Going to be taking that one because it was pretty much free in those circumstances.
Yep. Tempo Storm resetting, dealing with the wave that Gold Coin United pushed in. Very easy to back off that wave, grab the dragon. Still a lot of vision control down the bot side for Gold Coin United. We'll need to see what they want to do with their lane assignments. Generally speaking, Syndra does not want to be in a side lane, and Caitlyn doesn't love being mid either. She's fine there, but I think they're going to try and move the Caitlyn around more to the side lanes than anything around mid.
I want to see if they try to swap the duo to the top side, as we have seen them do in the past. If that Caitlyn wants to try taking down some more outer towers, that could be one of the places where she focuses down. Has the Berserker's Grease and the Zeal item picked up, in addition to 2 pieces of the Infinity Edge. There's going to be Sentinel coming up to this top side of the map here to try to get some damage down onto Solo, but looks like he sniffed that one out. It's going to be using the Equalizer to continue to clear out the wave, just like you mentioned before, Mark. And meanwhile, Phoenix.
Holy crap, a 2-man double stun 1v2 once again from Phoenix, this time blowing up the AD carry as opposed to the mid laner. This allows his bot lane to join up with him and just take this turret down. Once again, Gold Coin United using the Rumble ult to stem the pressure in the top side, getting an advantage around the mid lane.
Yeah, Phoenix just absolutely demolished Freeze in that one. Just wiped them off the face of the earth, and I don't even think they really needed their duo to kind of rotate to that mid lane to take the tower after that, but that's going to be Gold Coin United immediately responding to any sort of pressure, any sort of advantage that the Tempo Storm was able to get, and now just off the back of that play, 2,000 gold in the lead of Gold Coin United.
I mean, this is one of the things that people actually hate about Syndra, is the fact that she does do an extremely good job dealing with the 1v2 bot lane going there. So Tempo Storm wants to kind of start setting up this 1v1, get the Vladimir, who's extremely good in the side lane there. But unfortunately, Phoenix showing that you can't just assume an AD carry safe because there's a support next to him.
See, all Phoenix wanted to do was make sure that Caitlyn went to the top side like we said she might do. So he was just trying to prove us right.
Yeah, he's like, hey, Caitlyn, don't help me out. Though Tempo Storm being able to get some pressure down this mid lane as Gold Coin United backed away after grabbing that turret, able to respond to it in time so they avoid having it go down, but Tempo Storm trying to pull Gold Coin around the map a little bit.
Yeah, the downsides of having Vladimir in a lane matchup is, while Hatrix has stayed relatively safe and has not died outright to Phoenix himself, he has not necessarily been able to really put any sort of damage or pressure down onto that mid lane tower, so it was still about full HP when they went to pressure it. Now at about half HP for themselves. And Tempo Storm, as you mentioned, although they've been able to get advantages in the early game, and although they were doing things more proactively this time around, they'd never translated it into an early game objective. They've lost the dragon, they've lost the first tower, and they're still struggling to find their first of any of those.
Right, and the big thing there is the fact that Solo, despite going down early in the game, was able to keep a CS lead available and was able to ult the wave every time Tempo Storm was trying to force a play on the top side, which was usually done at the expense of somewhere else on the map. So they were sacking their bot lane turret to try and get one on the top side. Solo ults the wave, is able to back off, does not get dove. Second time again, they send their bot lane mid. That gets taken out by itself from Phoenix, and Solo surviving around the top lane.
Now we have both of the duo lanes making their way up to the top side of the map. So Tempo Storm, advantages that they were gotten, or because they were playing around wherever Freeze was on the map. Gold Coin United, however, have gotten advantages because they were playing around wherever Freeze wasn't on the map so far. They got him in the top side when Solo was able to stem the bleeding of that first blood and kind of keep up in the CS advantages, and Phoenix himself has basically been doing Syndra things and blowing up anybody who isn't Vladimir that comes into that lane. So now it's on Gold Coin United with that last outer tower looking to be their focus. What are they going to be doing next? They're sending Kha'Zix up there, they're sending Syndra up there, they're moving everybody around. It looks like they're just going to take this one down.
Yep, Tempo Storm not able to match the pressure. Gold Coin United's putting up on the top side of the map. Back off this turret, sack it. Down 2,000, almost 3,000 gold now, as Gold Coin United has taken the entire outer ring of turrets, and Tempo Storm still has not grabbed a turret this series.
So that's going to wind up being a huge burden on the minds of Tempo Storm, as now Gold Coin United have pretty much opened up a large portion of the map for themselves. They've also been able to open up, a large amount of gold for themselves. You mentioned about a 3,000, 2,500 gold advantage now coming across for them. That's going to be converted into the Morel Namicon and pieces for the Leandri's Torrent already acquired by the Syndra. You've seen Aegis of the Legion being completed for Mad Life. It's now Solo. He has one that doesn't quite have as much gold as his counterparts here. He's going to wind up getting dove. The Hemo Plague was on him. He flashes away. The heal comes in for Mash. The flash after there by Hatrix will make sure he seals the deal on that kill. But Hatrix now kind of caught out. He's going to wind up going into his pool for him. And with the Cavalry coming in and Sentinel and Quas, they're able to pick up a kill for themselves.
Right, and that time, Solo did not sense the pressure coming down from the mid lane. He knew Tempo Storm had recently been in the top side, so he thought it was fine to be able to wave clear by himself there. Doesn't drop the ultimate to do so, gets dove, but
here comes Phoenix. They're going to flash stun him immediately, though, and Sentinel will blow him up. It's going to be a kill traded away, though, as Santorin is finally able to take down Vladimir, but they just collapsed on Phoenix.
Yeah, it's also buying Tempo Storm up in the top side. They grabbed their first turret, grabbing the outer, continue to push into the inner, and now they're going to be grabbing the red buff away.
Well, Quas, though, is going to be taking a little bit of damage there as Mashes Caitlyn. Rurnon's Hurricane, not complete an Infinity Edge yet. Going to be dealing a little bit of damage, but now Santorin and Mad Life, they say, hey, if your dual lane's going to stay up there, we're going to continue to pressure down on this bot lane tower. We've chunked down to half HP off of the last map movement you made on top side of the map, but it does look like Gold Coin United, with the respawns coming in from the side of Tempo Storm, decide to back away.
Yep, Santorin will be able to grab this red buff that they just lost on the top side as well, so not terrible overall, but a good play from Tempo Storm, getting this gold lead closer back to even. Now sitting around a 1,000 gold disadvantage. We'll take a look at this collapse by Phoenix. Thought he was probably going to be able to turn this one around for his team.
Yeah, he thought he was collapsing, but it was him who got collapsed on double flash forward from Quas and Zentinel to just blow him up immediately.
Got to be careful near those walls. Gets stunned up by Quas, and Graves still had all his spells available, able to drop his QR combo, and does a lot of damage.
I'm talking about the lack of hard CC on the side of Tempo Storm. You know, that's the one kind of engaged tool that they do have, is the Flash Renekton stun into Graves' blow-up amounts of damage, which may not necessarily be the best thing going into the later
Yeah, I mean, you got about a 5-minute cooldown on a single target, 1.5 stun usually, so probably not the best engaged tool in League of Legends.
I can think of a lot more things like Twisted Fate Ultimate and Ash Arrow, or a lot of different things, but regardless of that, they will not necessarily have any of those forms of engagement whatsoever to contest Gold Coin United going for their second dragon of the game. Santorin said that one of the things he wanted to work on was better dragon control heading into the playoffs, and well, they got two for themselves in the early game.
Yep, got a Cloud Drake, got a Mountain Drake now. Gonna help them move around the map and take objectives faster. And Tempo Storm still a little bit on the back foot here, but not out of the game yet.
They're definitely closer than they were in game number 1, and they've definitely been more proactive and shown a stronger presence of mind to make things happen, and they are not down nearly as much as they were in multiple roles. The mid lane matchup relatively even here. Hatrick's holding his own now. Top lane matchup more even than you would like, considering how much early pressure Quas got. But more importantly, Zentinel 3-0-1 on Graves. Very, very similar farm and gold totals to Santorin. That's going to be one of the big keys in this matchup, is that Graves is now on even footing, if not slightly ahead.
Yeah, and I think another important thing is the fact that the Vladimir is basically online. 2-1-2, 200 farm, just 21 minutes into the game. That's actually extremely good, and because Gold Coin United as well are lacking in CC, it's going to be very hard to peel this Vladimir off of the backline. He's going to have his Zanya's available soon, hasn't started building it yet, but once he, you know, assuming he builds that, he'll have that kind of vulnerability. He has this W pool as well. And Gold Coin United don't have a way to stop him from going in between those.
No, they do have a Marilla, Namicon, and Leandri's Torment on Phoenix. However, cutting the healing from Vladimir can only do so much when you actually can't target him, and he's still healing off of multiple targets from a team fight sort of hemo plague. So we'll have to see what Gold Coin United is going to have to do in order to kind of stop that Vladimir. More importantly, what they're going to wind up doing at this point in time. Caitlyn has completed her Infinity Edge and has the Hurricane, but at the same exact time, we have Freeze stacking up towards his Muramana. His Trinity Force is completed. This is what we're talking about in the early lane stages. At this point in time, this is where Ezreal starts to come online, and this is where Caitlyn kind of stalls out until she gets another item or two.
Right, and it seems like after that play in the bot lane, Gold Coin United has slowed down a little bit, though Freeze gets stunned up again.
I think I saw that one once before. Is Phoenix going to take him extremely low, but the Leandri's Torment Burn not going to be enough to take him down. But Santorin jumping over to the side. It is going to wind up being Freeze flashing away and barely staying alive from that one.
Phoenix almost able to make the play 2v1 again in the mid lane. Not actually able to pick up the kill, just off there, but does force out a lot of summoners from Tempo Storm's bot lane. And now they're grouping up around mid, trying to pressure wall. Freeze is stuck resetting in the base.
So Freeze has to go back to heal. Will eventually come up towards this mid lane to help defend with the rest of his team. They have no Syndra ultimate available, but they still have multiple members of their team up there. Looks like Quas's Renekton was pushing up on the bottom side of the map, but now looks like Tempo Storm might be looking for a collapse, but they do have some vision on the side there by Gold Coin United. They know that Renekton is away, so they too will back away.
Gold Coin United not actually able to get anything despite that close kill that Phoenix almost got there. Just a little bit more damage on the turrets. That's a couple of the inner turrets that are starting to get low. Gold Coin United previously chunked out the bot one. They get some damage on the mid one here, and assuming that they keep this pressure up, it's very important to note that for the most part, these fights have been happening in situations where Tempo Storm can't actually grab objectives. The first time that they went really hard on Soraka in the bot lane, it's nice that they get the kill, but they can't actually grab a turret off of it. Same with the pressure topside that Quas had on Solo. And then once again, after they had that big bot lane dive on Solo, once again, there's no turret to grab. So Gold Coin United doing a good job keeping all the waves pushing into the side of Tempo Storm.
Right, and the one time Tempo Storm was able to do something was because they basically had enough members on the bottom side of the map to let Freeze kind of do whatever he wanted completely across the map from them. So if Freeze is with them, he's a large source of their damage, but if he's not with them, he's also the only one that's really forcing down those objectives for Tempo Storm, and that's something that they've done well during the Challenger Series, but it's something that Gold Coin United has definitely caught on to at this point.
Right, it feels like where Freeze is where the objectives will go down. Tempo Storm has done a better job of trying to snowball around Quas this game, and it's been slightly effective. Obviously that they're hanging in this game better than game 1, but they're still behind 2,000 gold almost, coming to the 25-minute mark.
Yeah, well, they do have a small window of opportunity to try to get something done in this mid lane area. We already have the Abyssal Scepter and Leandri's Torment completed for the Vladimir. Black Cleaver in addition to the Warrior Enchantment. 2 items picked up in the form of a Maul Malmortius and an additional Black Cleaver on Quas. So they do have some very strong champions with these 2-item power spikes, especially the Ezreal with the Muramana very recently being completed on top of the Trinity Force. So they are at a decent amount of power right now. Of course, you do have a Syndra on the opposite side who's going to be dealing a large amount of damage. You also have a Rumble who can be a big nuisance if you wind up landing something in an objective fight like this Equalizer here that's splitting up Sentinel and Quas. They're going to focus down onto the Graves and the shutdown will come through. Quas going to be the next target as they wind up slaying the Renekton. Santorin's going to have to flash ways. Hatrick jumps into the back line and Phoenix will actually wind up going down. It's actually 2 kills picked up there on the turn from Tempo Storm. Freeze picks up another one on this Ezreal. Hatrick's going to get slowed up there by the spikes from Santorin. So even though Gold Coin United are the first ones to spring the trap, Tempo Storm even it up in a 2 for 2.
Yeah, good 2 for 2 for both teams there. Solo starts it off with the flank. Ultimate not able to do a ton of damage to Sentinel, but enough to force him into a disadvantageous position. Gold Coin United jumps on them, gets a couple kills, but they kind of expose their backline at the same time. Hatrax is able to get a nice ultimate onto multiple members. They finish off Phoenix, and Solo goes down as well. But a lot of members were very low. Tempo Storm able to use the bot lane right after to grab the turret. So we'll take another look at this. As you see that ultimate, once again, so hard to land that without any kind of setup, though he is in a good position to finish off Sentinel there. And then here comes Hatrix being able to flash into this fit, and not really a great front line for Gold Coin United. Like we said, no one to really stop Hatrix from running wild in these team fights. So this is a big problem moving forward.
Yeah, we actually saw the Ignite from Karma being the reason why Syndra went down in that fight. So Phoenix not being able to survive through all of that. Now 1-3-3 on the Syndra. And as you mentioned, Tempo Storm were able to get a bottom lane tower after that one, although it was the minions that pushed that one down. So it wasn't necessarily the fact that they were able to all of a sudden take a fight and find an objective they were to get themselves. It was a very slow process that Quas been whittling down that tower from beforehand. But Gold Coin United will not be deterred from this one. The Rumble ultimate is back up. Syndra ultimate's back up. They're going straight for that dragon. They've had this vision control already. They had it for that fight and that pickoff. And that's Gold Coin United taking another objective with no response from Tempo Storm.
Yeah, Freeze was in base shopping, was not able to actually go and join up with his team to contest there. Tempo Storm going to try and push into mid wave instead and get some damage down onto this turret. They get a little lower, but Gold Coin United's able to rotate after that dragon take back into the mid lane and get there in time to keep the turret alive. Now both teams posturing around it.
Well, we normally said that Gold Coin United was the team that played things slow and steady and then tried to win the race that way. Tempo Storm has definitely made us known that their tempo this series is going to be a little bit slower than normal, as they are still hard-pressed to kind of find some openings. And with the competition that we mentioned, like, you know, you focus down on Quas on the top side. The Renekton's going to have like a window of opportunity in the early to mid game where he's going to be more powerful. That window's going to be closing relatively soon. The Ezreal does have his Trinity Force, but it's going to take a little bit of a while to kind of scale up into a later game carry standpoint. But by that point, you'll have Caitlyn doing the same thing. It's really going to be up to Hatrix on this Vladimir. Currently 2-1-3. As you mentioned, very large amounts of CS for him going towards that Zanya's Hourglass. He's going to be a big force to be dealt with in team fights, but nobody on the side of Gold Coin United, save for that Morello and Namacon, is really kind of worrying about the Vladimir and cutting through that healing.
Right, at some point, Caitlyn will end up grabbing an Executioner's Calling, most likely, when she starts building her last Whisper. No need to rush that, though, because no one on Tempo Storm is going to be building any armor, really. So we'll have to see if she actually ends up going with one. Quas, at some point, I'm sure will grab a little bit. And, yeah, like you're saying, the Renekton does fall off a little bit, but the thing to note is that a well-played Renekton is still a decent frontliner. We saw Impact in the NALCS being able to play that extremely well and still out frontline a lot of teams who had Shens and things like that. So it's not like the Renekton's role of being able to put a little bit of threat onto a backline completely goes away. And because Gold Coin United does not have great lockdown CC, they do have this Soraka to try and keep those members alive, but it's not actually peeling the Renekton off. It's not peeling the Vladimir off. And those two can make the life of the backliners for Gold Coin United very difficult.
Well, another thing making the life for Tempo Storm difficult here is that line of Caitlyn traps that they just cannot seem to push past to really get any sort of damage down on this mid lane tower. So while things have kind of devolved into a little bit of an ARAM style right now, it does look like that Tempo Storm will be utilizing the little bit of pressure they do have in the middle side of the map to try to get a little bit of vision established around the Baron Pit area. Don't think they're necessarily going to go for that objective. They want to make sure they could slowly encroach some of that vision control that they are known for. One of the most highest warding based per minute teams in the Challenger Series. Try to strangle out Gold Coin United because that was the big advantage GCU had over them in game 1.
Yeah, but the feel of the game has changed substantially. Gold Coin United pushing up a little bit here because Tempo Storm had sent a bunch of people home to recall, but it does feel like Tempo Storm has started to grab a little bit pressure back. They have had themselves set up in front of Gold Coin United's mid lane turret. Quas still has pressure in the side lanes, and it feels like Tempo Storm is slowly grabbing control of the waves back.
The only thing that Tempo Storm doesn't necessarily have is a grasp on the objectives on the map. And because of those 3 dragons, a Cloud Dragon gives them a little bit of move speed. Mountain Dragon means that when they are caught on those back timings, they're getting a little bit more damage dealt to their own towers. And the Ocean Drake means that Gold Coin United can kind of sit back here with their Soraka, sustain themselves up in this kind of like 4-1 or 1-3-1 situation that Tempo Storm is trying to force around the map. And Tempo Storm slowly but surely is trying to establish forward vision, slowly but surely is trying to get things done. And as you mentioned, it does kind of feel like they are controlling the pace of this game. It's just that their pace of this game is slow.
I mean, it's very hard to force plays at 30 minutes in when the gold lead is this close. You don't have big global plays available where you can try and get these pickoffs in side lanes. They are mostly a team fighting team comp. And so is Gold Coin United as you see them trying to group up around this mid lane, able to get there fast enough to force it down, grabbing their 3rd turret of the game, evening that up, and bringing the gold lead basically even.
Pretty much tied up in everything but kills right now between Tempo Storm and Gold Coin United in this game number 2. But I always have to kind of question, like, if this game does wind up going on a little bit longer, you have some very powerful late game carries on both sides, both the Vladimir and the Caitlyn. You do wind up having a late game Rumble who can still deal a decent amount of damage versus something like along the lines of a late game Ezreal. Although both of these teams seem very content to kind of keep the game state the way it's going right more, my big question is, who is this stall out eventually going to favor more?
So when you look at scaling, I think a lot of people make the mistake of looking at things in a binary way, where you say Kog'Maw's a hyper scaler. Wow, he's going to scale great into the late game. You say, oh, Renekton doesn't scale well. He's going to get outscaled by other tanks. Well, there's no other tank on the side of Gold Coin United. You need to look at how the 2 team comps actually interact. And so Tempo Storm has a very self-sufficient backline in the side of Karma and Ezreal, who are going to be able to hopefully just send in skill shots on their own, while Sentinel and Quas are going to be able to start these fights off. And Quas and Hattrick, excuse me, and Sentinel is able to throw in damage as well. So Tempo Storm has a front line and the ability to contribute from long range. Gold Coin United does not have great mobility on their backliner. Syndra, if you get onto her, does go down fairly easily, and Rumble can be a little bit of the same way as well. So I think this does favor Tempo Storm due to the fact that Gold Coin United doesn't have a great way to deal with them. That said, they do have a lot of burst potential still, so execution is still extremely important. Syndra can, of course, just blow up an Ezreal if he's not careful enough. So that's still extremely important, but assuming a standard straight-up 5v5 team fight, I think you have to give it to Tempo Storm.
Well, and as you see on the gold graph right here, one of the crucial reasons why Gold Coin United is still eking out certain advantages whenever Tempo Storm has that kind of back timing is the fact that they do have the gold lead and have held on to the gold lead for a while. And that's, of course, transition with the stacking dragons, with the extra pieces of items or quite slightly more early finished itemization is leading them to some of these advantages that was giving them a little bit of map pressure. But as you mentioned with Tempo Storm, the way that they're playing to the strengths of the composition, the way that they know that they do have pretty much the only front line on the Rift in this game, they are content to kind of sit back and bide their time to a point where their itemization is going to be pretty much be matched. And at that point in time, it really does come down to execution of the team comp. And if Tempo Storm's content with that, like they are content knowing the damage they have around this Baron Pit area and starting it up, that could be a way for them to go, but I don't know. That was spotted out.
Tempo Storm doesn't have nearly enough vision to go, control to go for any kind of trade there. What they're trying to do is bait around the Baron Pit, hope that Gold Coin United goes for the Mountain Dragon, and then when they do that, they're able to force around the Baron buff. But they did not have vision control. Gold Coin United has to just send a little bit of pressure to scare Tempo Storm off of that, and then they leave members onto the Mountain Dragon to grab their second one for free, basically. A mistake there by Tempo Storm. I think they could have opted into potentially just team fighting. Didn't need to go for some kind of objective trade there. Still unable to grab a dragon this game. The next one up is the Elder, so they won't be grabbing any of the buff dragons this game, any of the elemental ones. So bit of a mistake there by Tempo Storm. A little too easy for Gold Coin United to sniff that one out.
And there's been 7 dragons in these 2 games that have spawned so far, and 6 of them have gone over to Gold Coin United. So Maybe Santorin ate his Wheaties and has been able to take down every single dragon, almost every single dragon, like he promised us he was going to get better at. Is now Quas trying to slice and dice forward. We do see Hatrix collapsing from the opposite side. Will get stunned out by Syndra, though. Drops below half HP, so the Morellonomicon very close to proccing his healing debuff, and it will force Tempo Storm back away.
It is kind of difficult for Tempo Storm to just charge through Gold Coin United if Quas is not flanking. Even with an Ezreal speed up, though, we see them getting aggressive onto Solo, who mispositioned a little bit around the mid lane, forcing the heal out of Mashme to be able to get out of that one.
And the True Sharp Barrage came across, chunks into about half HP himself, but he does have a Soraka on his side and a Ocean Drake, so he will be able to sustain up a little bit. But this is just kind of poke wars back and forth. This Freeze getting extremely aggressive on the Solo there. Everybody from the side of GCU is kind of backing away through their own jungle, so that's going to actually be Tempo Storm getting a little bit of bully pressure in the mid lane, forcing back Gold Coin United.
Yeah, we talk about the fact they don't have any lockdown CC for Vladimir. They don't have anything for an Ezreal either, unless that Syndra stun connects or he missteps onto a trap. There's no one to stop him from running forward and blasting you with these Ezreal Qs, so that could be a big problem moving forward in these kind of standoff situations. No one's able to stop Ezreal from doing Ezreal things.
The Syndra did wind up coming from the side there as Phoenix makes his presence known in the mid lane, but no real stuns landing and no real damage being done. So both of these teams just kind of content to sit back, poke each other out, and continue to kind of just fight over ward control. These, I mentioned earlier, these are two of the highest warding teams in the Challenger Series, specifically Gold Coin United good at denying vision, as we see Solo getting a little bit pushy against Sentinel, putting some wards down, clearing some wards out in his opponent's side of the jungle. Both these teams, I mean, as much as it may not be interesting from a spectator standpoint right now, both of these teams are extremely, extremely good at just denying vision on the map. As you can see right here, now the Baron Pit area, which was once covered by Tempo Storm, completely dark today.
I am really surprised Gold Coin United did not even start off that Baron buff. They have double Mountain Dragon and an extremely fast Baron team comp. You would have thought that with being able to chunk out Sentinel and assuming he's trying to go home, they reacted from the mid pressure instead of forcing there. Now Quas opening up onto the rest of Gold Coin United.
Phoenix actually wants up using his flash as he got stunned up. The redemption comes down, but there's a good rumble. Equalizer zoning out most of Tempo Storm. Sentinel goes in, Sentinel goes out, but it's GCU whose health bars are dropping fairly low. The poke and the push forward from Freeze is there. Now a flash stun forward from Quas onto the flashless Phoenix. He will go down, but not before he trades his life for Karma. Now Tempo Storm maybe getting a little bit too aggressive. Freeze, though, will finish off Santorin, and it's going to be Tempo Storm. The Vladimir still somehow alive in this fight, taking themselves a very messy, a very bloody 2-for-1, and blinking health bars on pretty much everybody.
That was so close for Mash being able to go crazy in that team fight. Unfortunately, he did not have a way to get back over the wall and punish all the low health members of Tempo Storm. A slight mispositioning there by Phoenix. He gets hit by a couple of CCs, and then we talk about the Flash Renekton engage, able to set up the kill onto him. We'll take another look at this one. As you can see, it is very hard for Gold Coin United to really peel people off their members.
Ooh, Phoenix flashes on the opposite side of the wall there instead of towards his team. This is where Tempo Storm thinks they can collapse, but things look like they might be going good for GCU here as that Rumble ultimate kind of zones everybody away for a bit.
Yeah, it does a nice job zoning, but it doesn't actually damage anybody, and without any CC, that's not quite enough. And Madlife caught out a little bit on a warding mission on his own. Might be going down here.
Ooh, the collateral damage is not going to land, so while they do get the pick off on the Madlife, he will not wind up falling, but it will be Tempo Storm. Once again, going back to the Baron Pit area, putting down some vision.
Yeah, like I was saying, I think Gold Coin United had a little bit of a mistake there. They reacted to Tempo Storm maybe going up mid a little bit there. You have 4 damage dealers and a Soraka to heal you up should the Baron get scouted out. I think it would have been much smarter with their vision control to actually just start the Baron off and see if Tempo Storm tries to face check them. They choose not to do that. They go and react to the mid lane and lose a fight. Not heavily, but enough that Tempo Storm is starting to grab the gold lead now, up 1,000 gold on their own.
1,000 gold, about 40 minutes into the game. It's not the most gold in the world, but it does mean that's going to translate into some completed items for themselves. We have 3-item Vladimir now with the Zanya's Hourglass completed. Looks like he might be going for a Void Staff. He's going to be finishing that one up. We have double armor penetration items, the Edge of Night and the Black Cleaver picked up for Graves. Renekton now getting himself a bit tankier, has finished up his Randuin's Omen, going towards a Spirit Visit with that Spectre's Cowl in his inventory. And Freeze for himself has actually finished up the Blade of the Rune King, almost on the Maw of the Malmortius. But on the flip side for Gold Coin United, they just got the Guardian Angel on Kha'Zix. That Mortal Reminder has now been picked up by Caitlyn, so those heals coming in from Vladimir won't be nearly as impactful.
And it's very surprising to see basically no teleports used in the past, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes.
Oh, that's right. I forgot they had teleport in this game.
You wouldn't even think so. It's a old school Season 2, Season 3 top laners. They didn't take teleport. They took Ignite, things like that. Maybe you saw barrier heal even if you were crazy. But it is a little surprising. I think Tempo Storm would benefit a lot from a teleport flank on Quas. and he probably still has pressure on the Rumble. A little hard to tell at this point. So you would have thought to have seen him do that a little bit. Instead, he's just going for these stuns on Phoenix. Lands this one. Phoenix gets popped almost.
Yeah, he has to wind up blowing a bunch of shields there, but he is going to tag the Emo Plague. He decides to go forward. He's pretty much dead to rights. He'll trade his life for Karma once again, but now the fight is wide open as Quas picks up another kill on Soraka. Madlife winds up going down. Mash goes down. That's a kill on the Solo as well, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere, the Renekton slice and dices, and the team from GCU goes down.
Quas showing us that he doesn't need to play a normal tank to get good engages off. He gets another one onto Phoenix there. Phoenix trades his life for Sheep. Maybe not the best target he could have gone for. Goldcoin United was in trouble as Madlife went down as well, but they had a chance to win that fight until Mash, walked forward right into the pooled hat tricks. Maybe didn't see him there. It's a 4 for 0, and now Tempo Storm going to be able to grab Baron.
You know, we saw Santorin cutting the waves, so they really can't push up, but Tempo Storm's going to be okay with that. They wanted just going straight over to the Baron. We saw pings going down from GCU onto the Elder Dragon. We'll see a Santorin. Don't think he actually did that one himself, but that's Tempo Storm winning a fight, taking a Baron, and starting it off because of a slice and dice from Quas.
Yeah, we'll take another look at this one. Phoenix does get caught out, lives for a while with the defensive tools available, and I'm surprised when he flashes in here, he targets Sheep instead of maybe Freeze or Sentinel, who are both low health as well. Maybe a mistake there. Still not a terrible stop for Goldcoin United until Mash walks right into hat-tricks and gets one shot, essentially. And that's basically spells the end of the fight. Now a 4 for 1. Santorin not able to do anything to turn it back for Goldcoin United.
Well, finally, Tempo Storm wind up using the advantages they've slowly but surely gained, and they take over the gold lead. They take over map control. They take the Baron. They've already got they've started clearing out vision around that Elder Dragon portion of the map. And even though Tempo Storm may not benefit from it, denying that from Goldcoin United and their 4 stack of Elemental Drakes will be very important.
Right, and I think you could even just elect not to go for it currently. Use that Baron buff for pushing. This looks like what they're going to go for. Quas getting that top lane in as they have members in the bot lane as well. Goldcoin United focus more around the mid lane. Looks like Tempo Storm going to have to respond to that one. Quas will eventually grab this turret on his own. Rumble does do some damage to him, but not enough to burn through that health bar.
Nope, Quas with his Maw of the Malmortius, and a lot of HP on his side. Will be content to just go toe-to-toe against that Rumble. As long as he's got that Baron buff and those Baron buff minions on his side. Tempo Storm now is the one that seems to be dragging GCU all over the map now that they have this Baron buff available. Bottom lane tower looks like it's dropping extremely low. Will not go down as the rest of Goldcoin United to defend against it. But now it's very difficult for Goldcoin United to wind up wave killing everywhere they go, because 2 of their main sources of wave clear, the Rumble and the Cinder, are magic damage, and that does not bode well against Baron buffed minions.
Nope, definitely difficult to deal with that. Caitlyn, not a bad wave clearer in her own right, but does need to be able to auto-attack to do that, and can be a little scary with the Nezreal throwing Mystic shots at your face.
Or a Vladimir one-shotting you out of the blue.
Yeah, I mean, technically Vladimir should not be able to get in range that easily, but you know, you walk forward, you lose sight of him for a second. Tempo Storm going to try and 2-man this Baron. Santorin going to try and sniff it out. He's not in the best spot right now, but it is only at 2,000 health. He has flash available. Not going to go for the steal.
So they wind up getting the Elder Dragon on the side of Tempo Storm. It won't be the biggest burden. However, it will wind up being Quas also being able to split push down that top lane tower. That, of course, means that Solo up here defending against it doesn't have the equalizer to really turn fights for the side of Goldcoin United. And now Tempo Storm, they're the ones that had the map plays this game. Goldcoin United last game was doing it to them 20 minutes into the game. It takes about twice as long for Tempo Storm to get it going, but now it's them who have all of a sudden skyrocketed into about almost an 8,500 gold lead.
Right, and most importantly, they have cracked an inhibitor turret. That's really going to be extremely important for actually ending this game. As the game gets later and later, like we always say, the gold leads are not as important. A lot of members of Goldcoin United are already closing in on their final items. You see Phoenix, no item slots available, is sitting on the rod there, and same with kind of Mash, out of item slots, but does have the Vamp Scepter. Recalling now, maybe going to purchase something. So the gold lead isn't huge. Most importantly is the fact that they have finally cracked the base of Goldcoin United.
So Tempo Storm grabbing the reins of control in this game, as you mentioned already. With both of these teams not necessarily having a dedicated front line, with both of them having a difficult to execute, low to limited CC kind of composition, it really comes down to how confident are you in executing your team fight play. And with Quas kind of leading the charge and Tempo Storm making sure that Freeze and Hattrick are staying alive in the backlines in these fights, things seem to be going their way. And although we kind of questioned what they were going for in Champion Select, saying they drafted no crowd control, and that has kind of been their strong suit for the pretty much all of the Challenger Series, they are showing us here that they can execute on this composition, even though the Renekton will eventually not be as strong as he was like at level 11, even though the Ezreal takes a little bit of time to ramp up, as does the Vladimir. Once they get to this point and they've hit their stride, they have control of the game. The question is now, can they close it out?
That is the question. They're not out of the woods yet, though they are in a better spot. Quas no longer has the Baron buff on his creeps to help him take objectives. It's going to be easier for Soul to clear these waves out now, but the rest of Tempo Storm are rotating up, trying to join in on Quas. Goldco United kind of sees this one coming, going to try and cover. Tempo Storm not quite showing yet. There they go.
Goldco United up in this top lane, defending against this push from Tempo Storm. We did see about 3 or so towers going down, resulting in a Baron power play, just under 4,000 gold. As you mentioned, those Baron buff minions are no longer on them. Aspect of the Dragon will be falling off in just a couple seconds as well, so Tempo Storm will not have that extra little burst of damage. It looks like Goldco United are content to wait for that to fall off, and with the glow fading from Freeze and Quas, that is going to be the aspect of the Dragon just falling off of them now. And it looks like despite wanting to push up here, wanting to have multiple members on this top side of the map, they're unable to crack that inhibitor defense coming out from GCU, specifically the Caitlyn traps, but it is letting Hatrix just wreak havoc on poor Rumble in this mid lane.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like anyone's able to match the Vladimir and the split push anymore, so instead, Tempo Storm goes up to join up with Quas, which buys Hatrix enough time to grab the last outer turret of the game on the side of Goldcoin United, working their way slowly to taking control of Goldcoin United's base. Lots of vision control for them. Baron will be spawning in a minute and a half now, and Tempo Storm has all the pressure.
Yep, and they're going to just be content to kind of sit back on this one and wait for themselves to go up and complete that 6-item power spike. We've already got a Mortal Reminder being finished as the final item for Freeze. We have in the mid lane, Hatrick has completed his build by going for a Death Cap and a Spirit Visage, so he's going to be healing even more on this Vladimir. We have a Sterix Gauge and the Phantom Dancer picked up for Sentinel out of his jungle on Graves, and it does look like that Renekton wound up going for the Banshee's Veil. It's helping pop a lot of these Caitlyn traps we saw before, has his Guardian Angel available, so Tempo Storm, as you mentioned already, pretty much everybody except for Sheep, full itemization.
Right, and I think you see how annoying this Ezreal continues to be. A number of times Phoenix has his Banshee's Veils up and it just gets sniped off right away by Ezreal. And it's nice to negate some of that damage. You would prefer to have that for the potential Quas engage, which has been a big problem for Phoenix. Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is no one's a frontliner for Goldcoin United. Phoenix tends to play the furthest forward trying to get these stuns onto the side of Team Tempo Storm, but he's the one getting hit up.
Well, it goes to show why he has that Banshee's Veil in his inventory as well. Has actually stalled out on getting a Death Cap or any really huge ticket AP item because of going for that defensive itemization. At the same time, we do have Santorin getting his own Guardian Angel. We have on the bottom side of the map, Mash has looked at go for what seems to be a Phantom Dancer as a second Zeal item, as his his sixth and final item in his
Quas flank.
Caitlyn, and Quas. Yeah, looks like he's teleporting in, wants to kind of go for something over here. Pops the Dominus extremely early, slices and dices down on the Phoenix. He's actually not going to get stunned up in that, but it does have to flash away. The Equalizer ripped
Nice
across
ultimate.
multiple people from Tempo Storm. Hatrick's dropping extremely low early on, as is Quas. So that front line from Tempo Storm dropping down extremely low, and now GCU, they want to try to turn around onto Sentinel. He is going to wind up dashing and collateral damaging his way out of that one. A lot of abilities being used, a lot of health bars dropping low, but Goldcoin United, they're going to force Tempo Storm back for now.
Yeah, but how does Goldcoin United really punish that? You see the fact that Renekton and Hatrix are able to get out of there, and they don't have any CC to punish that over-engage by Tempo Storm. So despite the failed TP flank in a sense from Quas, it does put Goldcoin United into a tough spot. Now they're going to try and force down to this Baron. They do have the double Mountain Drake to make this go down extremely quickly. They might grab it.
It's pretty risky, but it looks like they will be going for it, and Santorin's going to be able to smite that one away. Sentinel tried to go in and steal it, but he goes down, and now in a 4v5 situation, GCU are going to try to turn this around, but it's 2 quick kills picked up there for Tempo Storm. Santorin on the front side, and Quas on the back side will pick up kills for their team. Matt's going to try to channel the ulti on the Hatrix. It will not wind up landing. So far, it has wound up being a 2-for-2 trade, but the Baron goes over to the side of GCU.
Yeah, very important that they're able to grab that Baron. Stops Tempo Storm from grabbing it. Maybe they can start getting their own going as they haven't lost any inhibitors yet. And a missed position there by Freeze. He wanted to go in and punish Goldcoin United, who were pinned up against the Baron pit wall. Phoenix was able to drop a ton of damage on him, get him low enough that Santorin was able to move in to finish him off. Very dangerous fight for Tempo Storm. I'm surprised they went for the steal. They could have just tried to keep Goldcoin United pinned up against that wall. They had just forced a teleport flank, so there were a ton of summoners down on the side of Goldcoin United. And I think just looking for the team fight would have been the better option.
Yeah, Tempo Storm, I thought with them trapped in the pit and no Rumble ultimate available to them, they would have just gone for the fight, but Sentinel trying to be the hero, get the smite steal on that one, is unable to seal the deal.
Yeah, you see Freeze go for the arcane shifting, gets dropped down to a couple hundred health, tries to lifesteal through Santorin, who's moving up to finish him off, not able to do so. And once Freeze is down, that really annoying Ezreal, who you can't get off you, is no longer a threat.
Because of that one, now GCU, they may be down in gold overall, but now that we're at the 49-minute mark here, it's going to be extremely late game in the gold lead, slowly but surely not going to matter. What will matter now, however, is these Baron buff minions from Goldcoin United. There's still a lot of towers left on the map for them to have to try to break through. This could be a very powerful pickup with Baron for them as, you know, the wave clear from the side of Tempo Storm, they have a Graves. I guess Ezreal's okay. The Vladimir won't be able to rip through these minions very effectively with the Baron buff on them. It's kind of like both of these compositions have very similar strengths and weaknesses.
Right, both teams low CC, both teams high damage. Tempo Storm has a little bit more frontline, so we've seen Quas able to start off a number of these fights, but once you have this Baron buff, neither team clears them extremely well. Quas doesn't do a ton of damage. Patrick's not going to do that much as a magic damage dealer, and Ezreal, same thing. A lot of his wave clear comes from his ultimate. So Goldcoin United's turn now with the Baron buff to start sieging down these inner turrets and hopefully crack the base for themselves.
And we did actually see Mash decide he wanted to switch out his Phantom Dancer for a rapid fire cannon, so he's gotten that for himself. As this 6-item Caitlyn is pretty much completely online, one of the stronger late game carries for herself. Also has a Maw of the Malmortius, so there's it's not going to be as much of a threat as being one shot by a Vladimir if he so happens to get to that back line from Goldcoin United. We do see a little bit of damage coming across on the Mash, but they are going to wind up taking yet another tower on the side of GCU off the back of this Baron buff. They still have Rumble split pushing on the bottom side of the map. His teleport is available, Quas's is not, and Quas, being the main forward of engage for Tempo Storm, has to stay grouped up with the rest of his team.
Yeah, it's a little surprising to see Goldcoin United not try a little harder to focus on the inhibitor turrets. It's nice to grab these inner turrets, but you do need to find a way into the base. They are going to siege up around mid lane, so it looks like they are going to start looking for this one. Mash gets chunked out a little bit, but he does have the Soraka there to heal him up. Healing debuff on, wait for that one to run out. Madlife actually trying to hold on, not blow his healing. Does hurt himself to do so.
Well, now it's taken a little while for Goldcoin United to get into this advantageous position, about 40 or 50 minutes or so, but now those Caitlyn traps are going to be used offensively. And as I say that, they decide to go back and retreat.
Right, Elder Dragon, will be spawning in a minute here. Not too much time left on the Baron buff, so they're not going to try and use this to actually crack the base at all. Inhibitor turret line will stay up for Tempo Storm. Looks like we're going to need at least one more big objective fight here to potentially close this game out.
Well, an objective fight could be all that it takes to end this game, but it's going to be a doozy of a fight. If you look across, even the supports are coming into their full item builds right now. We have the 5 items for Sheep in addition to the Ardent Sensor, the Redemption, the Locket of the Iron Slaughter. On the flip side, we have Madlife going for a Giant Spell. He needs the health in order to heal up all of his allies as well. Has the Mikhail's Crucible, so that Flash Renekton engage tool, air quotes, you guys can't see that Tempo Storm has on their side will not necessarily be as powerful if you just remove the stun from somebody. And Goldcoin United, despite having a larger Baron power play than Tempo Storm, definitely had a lot of towers left on the map, a lot of pressure to make up for on the map, but at this point, all that gold, it's not really going to anything but elixirs at this point.
Yeah, here we see Goldcoin United going to focus down on the Elder Dragon, able to burn through this one extremely quickly, but Tempo Storm is looking to contest.
They do have those double Mountain Drakes you mentioned on the Baron buff fight, and this Elder Dragon going down extremely low. The Equalizer comes out, and they have 4 Elemental Drakes on top of that, so Quas goes in, but he's taking a ton of damage. Even Hatrick's in the back line. Sheep able to pick up the first kill on Solo, but a good stun comes out from Phoenix across the back line. This could be the fight that decides game 2. A flash forward from Phoenix. They've shut down Hatrick's. They've popped the Guardian Angel on Quas, and that's going to be Goldcoin United looking to clean up the fight. A reset from Santorin gets the slow on to Sheet. They picked up 2 kills. They've lost 1, but they got the Elder Dragon.
It's going to be interesting to see if they're able to actually close the game out with these kills. It's around a minute death timers. The Ezreal is still alive. It is still hard for Goldcoin United to deal with him. A number of members are fairly low. Madlife doing his best to heal them up. Low himself, hard to do that when you are a low health Soraka. They're going to grab this inhibitor turret, see how much they push for.
Whew, that tower just gets absolutely destroyed as now they're going to wind up raising the mid lane inhibitor. That one will wind up going over to Goldcoin United. That's actually the first inhibitor this entire game, going down at 53.5 minutes.
Yeah, it's taken a very long time to do so. And one of the things I was about to comment on just before we ended up in that situation was I was a little surprised to see Quas go for a Titanic Hydra. I think he grabbed that one fairly late. As we're taking a look at this team fight first. Quas goes in, is able to drop a lot of damage down onto Goldcoin United there with the help of the Graves ult, but the Elder Dragon going over makes this such a hard fight to win, because any sort of poke you take here burns for so much damage.
45 damage per stack of Dragon with the 4 stacks of Dragon plus the Elder Drake is so much damage. You can see the turnaround on the Hat-Tricks, who was sustaining himself rather well, but with all that burn damage coming through, Tempo Storm needed to start that fight before the Dragon went down, and they just could not pull the trigger in time.
A very difficult fight to win. It was hard for them to walk in there. Gold Coin United was able to set up vision control beforehand. They had the double Mountain Drakes to burn it down extremely quickly, as well as having a very high damage team comp. So they grabbed that Elder Dragon, they grabbed the fight, and they grabbed the mid lane inhibitor. Just to return to that point I was making really quickly, I think the Titanic Hydra might have been a mistake. I wouldn't have minded seeing a kind of item to help deal with the split push potentially. Obviously Rumble doesn't deal with banner creeps that well. You potentially look at that, or maybe something along those lines, these are Rock Portal, something to help get the split push pressure going, because we could see that Gold Coin United was struggling to deal with that kind of split up pressure.
And Solo's 1-7 for Rumble. The first pick for the red side this game, not exactly being able to match up against the Renekton. We saw him giving up first blood. We've seen him struggle against that Renekton in the 1v1 all game, pretty much off of the back of that, as well as just the fact that his Rumble ultimates have been pretty decent in team fights, but he had to use it a lot early on to wind up clearing out waves, and it has just not been the pick to really dominate the game like they were hoping from the side of Gold Coin United. The Elder Dragon buff, the aspect of the Dragon, has actually fallen off of them at this point in time as well. Baron buff is back on the map. They still have those 2 Mountain Drakes in their pocket, so they could potentially start this one up and try to burn it down quick. There's still no Guardian Angel available for Quath, who's going to pop his Dominus, try to go in here. The Rumble ultimate goes out, though. They're a little bit split on if they want to finish this Baron or go for the fight, but Quath, he might be bringing the fight to them. He's going to wind up getting slowed and stunned up by Phoenix. The Zanya's Hourglass already popped by Solo, but Quas is already down. So that's all the front line in the game gone, just off that one character going down. The redemption from Mad Life is there. The Soraka heals are still coming out. His Wish was actually popped earlier. This is going to be the Baron going over to Gold Coin United.
They are able to win another fight. Gold Coin United is doing a great job of getting to the objectives first and being able to set up so Tempo Storm has to walk into them. Once again, Quas tries to get that force through the front line. Obviously, Renekton not the best champ to do it. He managed to get it a couple times this game, very impressively, but not going to work this time around. He gets peeled off and killed. And then after that, it's too hard for the rest of Tempo Storm to walk up to really contest that Baron. Gold Coin United grabs that one, doesn't even bother resetting. They're going to look for this top inhibitor turret now.
Yeah, unfortunately, Quas did not have his splash available for that fight. That's why. Half of his engage wasn't there. But it does look like that off the back of that Baron, Gold Coin United will be pushing on to that top lane inhibitor. What Quas still did for about 20 seconds now, and already that mid lane inhibitor falling down. Gold Coin United might just rotate around and try to threaten inhibitor or Nexus towers. But looks like Sebit Santorin already on the bottom side. They're just going to go for the complete win, making up for all the lost ground, taking down every single lane.
Yeah, I think this is the right call here. There's no reason to try and end with just 2 inhibitors. You can grab the third for free, basically. Very hard for Tempo Storm to contest this as long as they don't get chunked out here. They're going to burn this turret down relatively quickly. No minions now. Need to take it slow for a second here.
Quas actually respawns and immediately goes to the front line, takes a lot of damage. So his Guardian Angel still not available. He has to be very careful about where his health bar is going to be as the Baron buff cannon minion continues to deal a little bit of damage to that tower, but it will be cleaned up there by Freeze. Gold Coin United just starting to reset. They know that they have 2 waves of super minions pushing in on the top and the mid side. They know they have that bottom lane they can just group up with in just a second. And as you said, Gold Coin United style, taking it slow and steady.
Yep, they're going to try and grab this last inhibitor turret. If they're able to grab the inhibitor as well, they start getting the double super creeps. Going to help them end this game much faster. Caitlyn, one of the best siegers in the game, cracks that one. Only the inhibitor left standing. Super creeps are also slowly funneling into the base as well, pulling Tempo Storm away from focusing on wave clearing down the bot lane.
Gold Coin United now with only 1 inhibitor left on the map for Tempo Storm to defend. Baron buff going to be ticking away for about 1 minute and 20 seconds still. They can...
What's that trap placement, Mash? Come on.
He's drawing an arrow. That's where they want to go next. They're going towards mid lane after this.
Yeah, I hope he sets those up to actually get some real good zoning out here, open himself up to get this inhibitor. Phoenix doing the work for him, trying to hit a stun on them. Now,
Equalizer was used to kind of zone them away and get some minion damage on, but Quas going to try to go in. The Zanya's Hourglass is popped, though Santorin's going to collapse on Hat-Tricks as soon as he went in, and that's going to be the first kill. The reset comes out for Kha'Zix. forces back the rest of Tempo Storm. Gold Coin United off the back of just that one kill looks confident enough to focus down on the Nexus Towers. Mark, after 58.5 minutes, a comeback here from Gold Coin United is going to be how they take game 2.
Yeah, they move themselves up 2-0 in this best of 5 and an extremely long, extremely hard-fought game. Gold leads traded back and forth. Kills all over in the early game, trading around there. And it was a very close game, and you got to see that both teams really did struggle with these low CC, low tank compositions.
Yeah, and Tempo Storm looked like they were kind of slowly coming into the way they wanted to play the game. You mentioned before that when it comes down to the compositions like these two that have very limited amounts of crowd control, very limited amounts of frontline space or tanks in general to absorb damage, it comes down to how you execute it. Tempo Storm took a very long time, but once they hit about 35 minutes into the game, it wound up turning into a favor where they felt more confident in the way they were playing their engagements and playing their team fights, but eventually you have a late game Caitlyn, you have a late game Syndra, you have a late game Renekton who even that we play it perfectly can't absorb everything.
Yeah, I mean, eventually every game ends up in the state where the damage dealers take over, the tanks can't deal with a lot of focused fire, and especially someone like Renekton who doesn't have that kind of guaranteed lockdown CC like a lot of things have, Nautilus, Maokai, you know, a lot of those kinds of champions. And I thought Quas did an extremely good job in the early mid-game, being able to not only pressure the top lane on his own, which is what really keyed Tempo Storm for finding a lot of advantages in the early game, but also in the mid-game getting a lot of stuns on the Phoenix, which set himself up and the rest of the team to actually win some of those fights.
His mid-game, late-game Renekton was fine, but his late-game Renekton left a little bit to be desired, as it did wind up lasting for long enough to the point where Gold Coin United's composition was really able to kind of stall things out, and eventually, because they had been stacking up dragons at the same time, they were able to force a lot of objective fights, including a Baron fight, which is really where GCU started to kind of take back control of the game.
Right, that really is the critical thing, is the fact that they had the extra dragons to be able to force some of these objectives harder, and they were often there first, setting up vision, making Tempo Storm walk into them.
Yeah, and this is what we have actually a replay of the example of the Baron fight as well that kind of shows this is where Gold Coin United really kind of started to take control of some of the game, is where Tempo Storm wanted to kind of corral them in this pit, let them take damage from the Baron, but then they go for the steal instead of going for the fight.
Right, this was right after Quas had a TP flank that forced out a lot of Gold Coin United summoners. You think with them pinned in the Baron pit, you just take the fight. Instead, Sentinel goes flashing in, trying to grab the Baron. He's unable to do so and goes down as well. And then a small mistake by Freeze in his positioning lets him get focused down by Phoenix and Santorin, which was enough for them to be able to kind of survive that kind of risky Baron attempt and then get onto the map and start using it. They weren't able to grab an inhibitor right away, but eventually they were able to take enough of the inner turrets that the next fight that they would win would give them those objectives.
Yeah, and because of that, they were able to establish not only map pressure, but also vision control, and it translated into them going for an Elder Dragon, not just a couple of minutes later, and it was another fight where Tempo Storm corralled them into the pit. It looked like it was going to be going extremely well for them, but they wait too long, the Dragon goes down, and the Aspect kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, you get to see Quas here once again trying to force in through the front of Gold Coin United, not able to do so after the Baron or the Elder Dragon has been secured by Gold Coin United. It's extremely hard to win this fight. You just take so much extra damage from the true damage burn, and as soon as they're able to disengage from Quas, they just focus the closest member down one at a time. The first one to drop there is Hatrix. A lot of untargetability keeps him alive for a long time, but Gold Coin United just needs to sit around until they're able to focus him. After he drops, they turn on to Quas, the other frontliner for Tempo Storm, and they're able to take that fight. And I think it was a lack of ability to find flanks for Tempo Storm that really, really hurt their ability to win this game. That last Baron situation, Quas was pushed up really far into the mid lane when he could have swung around behind the Raptor pit and started setting up for a potential flank opportunity. Instead, decides to come in the front door once again. And it can be hard without teleport to find these flanks, but that's really what his team needed, as opposed to constantly trying to run through the front door, because eventually Phoenix stopped getting stunned.
Yeah, and you actually heard before that matchup from Santorin himself saying that Gold Coin United has the mental fortitude from all the years of experience combined, individual players, not as a roster, but all together, they have that experience. They have kind of the tenacity to kind of go through those situations and make sure they don't get nervous, they don't make these uncharacteristic mistakes. Tempo Storm, on the other hand, even though you weren't ahead in gold that entire game, you felt like you had control for a full 60 minutes where you just kind of let it slip away from you. That's got to be devastating to try to come back from.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about how Gold Coin United had a small gold lead for a lot of the early game, but Tempo Storm still felt like they were up in pressure a lot of the time, and that they were fine scaling into the mid game. Eventually, they grabbed and tied up all the outer ring of turrets. That's when they started grabbing the gold lead. So Tempo Storm had a good early game plan. I thought they executed it well. The problem was, despite winning a couple team fights in the mid game, they weren't able to transition that into a big enough advantage.
Right, and it did wind up stalling things out for a little bit, but Gold Coin United were able to find their stride and pull ahead in this series 2-0. Stick around, see if they sweep the series, or if Tempo Storm is going to take things back into their control and strike back in game number 3. Solo is going to be marked for death with the Vladimir Hemoplex, so he will go in and get as much damage as possible, but it's Quas that flashes and picks up a kill. The Vladimir is going to be going forward as well. Quas will fall, but Equalizer here, splitting up Sentinel and Quas are going to focus down onto the Graves, and the shutdown will come through. Quas going to be the next target as they wind up slaying the Renekton. Santorin's going to have to flash away as Hatrix jumps into the back line, and Phoenix will actually wind up going down. It's actually 2 kills picked up there on the turn from Tempo Storm. The poke and the push forward from Freeze is there. Now a flash stun forward from Quas onto the flashless Phoenix. He will go down, but not before he trades his life for Karma. Now Tempo Storm maybe getting a little bit too aggressive, but he's taking a ton of damage. Even Hatrix in the backline. Sheep able to pick up the first kill on Solo, but a good stun comes out from Phoenix across the backline. This could be the fight that decides game 2. A flash forward from Phoenix. They've shut down Hatrix. Mark, after 58.5 minutes, a comeback here from Gold Coin United is going to be how they take game 2.